Good morning, Booktube. As you can see, it is a cold, chilly, gray, rainy day. We are coming to you live from the Wawa station. Good old Wawa. Good convenience store. Got some great sandwiches and good eats on the road. It's kind of the life force of the upper east of the United States here. I myself am just warming up a little bit before heading to work. Pass the time. How about you and I discuss a little book I read recently. It's called The Drop by Dennis Lehane. Now, The Drop, good like mystery crime thriller here. So right off the bat, explain the title. Like, what is The Drop? The story revolves around a drop bar. It's a bar in Boston. It's run by organized crime. And drop bars are places where, the crime bosses they take their money. Also, they can't go to a bank with this stuff, so they have the mob bosses own like these different businesses, and they use them to drop off and pick up money. And like, as they say in the book, like these drop bars, like when your location is picked to be the drop point, you have no idea when. It could be in a week, could be in a year. You have no idea. So that's where this story takes place, at a drop bar in Boston. And we have our, well, first of all, there's the plot. Before I get into the characters, here's the plot. At one point in the night, these two armed men come in and they rob the bar. Now, thankfully for the people in the bar, they don't take the big money, the illegal money. They only take the money out of the register, which amounted to a few $1,000s. But still, the mobsters, in this case the Chechen mob in the story, they want to know who robbed their bar and they want their money back. So that in essence is the plot of the story. We follow two main characters throughout this little journey. First up is Marv. Marv used to own this bar. That's actually the name of the bar is because of Marv. So Marv himself, he, like back in the day, like he used to be like a little, he used to be like the criminal element himself. He had like a crew. They did like loan sharking, other little small time things. Like it made him feel like a big man in town, which is an important part of the story too. Marv is always felt like the little guy. And like even though like he had to resort to a life of crime, it made him feel like a big guy in town. He was respected and feared. As twisted as it may seem, but it worked out for Marv. Until one day, the Chechen mobsters, they wanted Marv's business, so they come in, and Marv, being the little guy he is, he was no match for them, so he gave up his bar to the Chechen mob. Now he still runs it, but he doesn't own it. And that does not sit well with Marv at all. Like, makes him feel like such a little guy, like once again. But even like throughout the story too, whenever they interact with the mobsters, they always kind of talk down to Marv, because they know it's his bar, they took it from him, they know there's always going to be their resentment there, so they always got to be a little firm with Marv to keep him in his place, if you will. Don't get any crazy ideas. And that's the story of Marv. Because as the story goes on, like once again, that little guy mentality, it never leaves him and just builds up and escalates with him. Which brings us to our second character, Marv's cousin Bob. Bob's an interesting character too, because right off the bat, we don't know his backstory, but whatever it was, he's very guilt-ridden and conflicted about it. It's like they mentioned like something happened in his life, and he's let like the last 10 years of his life just go by. And one scene that's very telling, like Bob, he feels so guilt-ridden. He goes to Sunday Mass. While he attends Mass, he does not take communion. Like the bread and the wine, the body of Christ, blood of Christ, he refuses to take it. Ask anybody with a religious upbringing, they could tell you like, ooh, like how guilty do you feel to feel you're not worthy enough to take communion at Mass? So that's Bob's backstory. So right off the bat, we got this conflicted fellow, and things kick off with him. He's walking home one day, and he hears like a rumbling in a trash can. And there's like a little puppy. There's this little beaten, abused puppy left to die in a trash can. And so he finds the dog, and it was just like in front of the dog was like randomly dropped in front of a woman's house. Like the woman in the house calls out to him like, "What are you doing in my trash?" So anyway, she helps him out with the dog. And the two of them have like a little budding romance together. Her name's Nadia. Two of them become friends, and so Bob, he's starting to find a little romance in his life, which is good for him. But things get out of hand with the dog. Turns out the man who dumped the dog and left it to die, he decides he wants his dog back. But not only that, he wants to. He thinks he's going to terrorize Bob. He wants Bob to pay him money for it. If he doesn't, he's going to. If Bob doesn't give up the dog willingly, he's not going. He's going to go to the authorities, get his dog back, and do some very unspeakable things. You figure that one out. So we have our two characters. You got Marv and his relationship with the Chechen mobsters. We have Bob with this guy and the dog. Things just escalate. It's got to reach a boiling point at some point, and it's a pretty good one. One other key point in the story too, it's a rather important fact. The guy who left the dog to die, who was the original owner of the dog, he claims that he had murdered someone like about 10 years prior. Like, it's part of the story, like a local guy in town like 10 years ago went missing. Nobody ever knew what happened to him or who killed him, but this lunatic with the dog, he claims to have been the one who committed the murder. He's trying to intimidate Bob. He's like, yo, I did that. Give me my money for the dog. And that plays out for quite interesting in an interesting way too. I don't want to ramble on too much to give the story away, but like I said, like we have both our characters, both their storylines. They escalate. Eventually gets to a point where Bob, he sits down with Marv and he asks him a very straight up question. He asks Marv, like, are you about to do something desperate again? ... Like, what does that mean? And Bob asked Marv a second question. He asked him, like, are you about to do something that we can't clean up this time? Oh boy. So imagine how, like, Bob's past was kind of holding him back 10 years of his life. Things escalate, things start to get interesting and come to quite a conclusion. I'll put it that way. I'll leave it at that, folks. Also, this movie, The Drop, I'll explain how I came across it. It was originally a movie. That's how I came across the movie. And then it said in the credits, based on a book by Dennis Lehane. So then I went back and read the book. Tell you about the movie. First of all, I think it was the last movie released with James Gandolfini, The Sopranos. He plays Cousin Marv, and Bob was played by Tom Hardy. So, right off the bat, how are you not intrigued by a cast like that? And the budding romance with the girl Nadia was played by a Swedish actress. I can never, for the life of me, pronounce her name correctly, but I think it's safe to say she's most famously known for playing the main character in the original Girl with the Dragon Tattoo movie, like the original Swedish version. Also, I mentioned the author Dennis Lehane. Like, this movie, The Drop, was my introduction to him. And you go back, you look at his bibliography, start looking at some of the names of his books. You got Mystic River, Gone Baby Gone, Shutter Island. Like, there have been some pretty great movies adapted from this guy's books. Now that I know that, I got to go back and start reading all of them, because the movies I mentioned, I've seen them, and they've all been good, even great at times. So yeah, damn. So thank you to The Drop for introducing me to Dennis Lehane. Okay, let's wrap it up, folks. There is one thing I have to address. People always compare the movies to the book. There was one big thing in the movie that I liked a whole lot more than the book. And once I sign off on here, I'll get it. You stick around for another minute, I'll get into the little spoiler talk about that. So, anyway, signing off, folks. It's still, let's see, let's take a little while before work starts, but I'll finish my coffee, then I'm going to drive off. So, like I said, stick around for spoilers if you like, but until then, take care, everybody. See you next time. Okay, spoiler talk. The name of the guy who owned the dog and abused the dog, the character's name is Eric Deeds. Now, like, I remember how I mentioned before how, like, Marv, he's always like the little guy. You always thought he was trying to act like a big guy. Well, you see that too with Eric Deeds as well. Like, spoilers. Like I said, he was trying to take credit for, like, the murder that happened 10 years ago that was never solved. He claimed it was him. Well, Eric Deeds never committed the murder. Like, he's a phony. Like, at the time, like, he was actually doing a stay in a mental hospital. Whereas, as Marv so eloquently put, he did a stint at the cuckoo house. So, So Eric Deeds, he had this unsolved murder. He was taking credit for this murder, his own twisted way to build up his street credit. But really, in fact, he was in a mental institution. So, like, take credit for a murder, people think you're dangerous and maybe respect you more. Once again, like Marv, kind of twisted logic, but in that world, I guess it helps you out. So, that's a theme in the book between Marv and Eric Deeds. You got a couple guys trying to act tougher than they really are. And you're dealing in a criminal underworld with some pretty dangerous people. When it's time to put up or shut up, you know, things aren't going to work out for you if you're a phony. And I like the way it worked out in the movie was so much better, because in the book, Eric Deeds had killed someone. Like, he got out of his stint, his prison, whatnot, and like he was like, he had a deal going with the guy. The guy went back on his deal, so Eric Deeds killed him. Well, in the movie, they erased that completely. That never happened. So it was much more effective because it really painted him more as a loser. Like in the book, he actually killed someone. He's taking credit for this other murder, but in the movie, they erased that altogether, and he's just like a loser pretending to have killed someone and trying to be intimidating. Way more effective in the movie. I like that a lot better. Okay, that's all the spoiler talk I have. But of course, one other thing, there is the question of that unsolved murder. What happened there? That I'm not going to get into because that's the big story. Eric Deeds is just a somewhat big thing, but it's not the big thing. You'll have to watch it or read it for yourself to figure that one out. Okay. Take care, everyone. Happy spring.